Thank you. Could I ask those members who are leaving the chamber to please do so quickly and quietly, as we were about to commence our final item of business this evening. And the final item of business is a members' business debate on motion 16854 in the name of Stuart McMillan on Peel Port's conservancy fee plans for Clyde Port area. This debate will be concluded without any questions being put, and I call on Stuart McMillan to open the debate. Up to 7 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. First, I want to thank colleagues from across the chamber for supporting this and also the previous motion. This is an important issue that needs to be debated, and the support from a motion demonstrates the widespread opposition to Peel Port's conservancy fee plans. This reflects the dialogue I've had with the boating sector, as everyone I've spoken to rejects the proposed conservancy fee for the Clyde Port area, a view also held by many people who are not sailors or boaters. Presiding Officer, in today's polarised world, it's rare to actually find an issue that unifies everyone. But when it comes to this issue, it's clear that people think this proposal is not appropriate and it must be abandoned. The Clyde belongs to the people of Scotland, not corporate interests. I established a cross-party group on recreational boating and marine tourism in 2009, and we have been pivotal in delivering Scotland's first marine tourism strategy, which was Awakening the Giant in 2015, and also the refreshed strategy, Giant Strides, in 2020. We are an active cross-party group. Now, to provide some background to the motion, in August 2024, Peel Ports presented to a group of Clyde-based marina operators their initial plans to levy a conservancy fee on all leisure vessels between 6 metres and 24 metres long, using the waters within the Clyde Port Authority area. The plans were subsequently released on social media. Although proposed to be introduced on the 1st of April 2025, Peel Ports did not publish a detailed plan for the fee, setting out, first of all, the rationale, the services to be provided, and also the administrative arrangements. Unsurprisingly then, the sector began to come to its own conclusions about the motives for introducing such a charge. Now, Peel Ports attempted to justify the levying of conservancy fees by citing examples from elsewhere in Scotland, where harbour charges are applied to leisure craft. However, the Clyde Port area is 450 square miles. It's not regarded as a harbour and contains numerous remote waters with negligible commercial traffic. The examples include the Kells of Bute and the entire length of Loch Fyne, just to give 2 examples. Now, consequently, it's an area with many leisure craft, both local and visiting, with estimates of up to 50% of Scotland's leisure vessels. It's interesting then that none of the examples given by Peel Ports are conservancy fees applied to leisure vessels under 50 gross tonnage, plus they all relate to charges for the use of specific facilities such as piers, jetties and moorings belonging to the Port Authority in the relevant area. Yet Peel Ports will not provide additional specific services and facilities, therefore claims that the proposed conservancy fee is comparable to existing charges from other harbours and ports really is disingenuous. Presiding Officer, I brought this motion to the Chamber today because Inverclyde stretches along the west coast of Scotland and is home to several boat clubs and 2 first-class marinas. And many of my constituents are recreational boaters and may frequently welcome visitors to our beautiful part of the country. Boating benefits my Greenock and Inverclyde constituency. It creates and safeguards jobs, and it is a draw for visitors. The marine tourism has grown locally and nationally thanks to the work of businesses and communities who want to show what our shores have to offer. However, the implementation of a conservancy fee will damage my local economy. The volume of correspondence and level of anger regarding these conservancy fee proposals is nothing like I have seen before. I've received emails from constituents and representations from boat clubs and marinas from across the UK. In addition, the petition I started on the Change.org website has over 4,600 signatures. Now, quite simply, people will stop coming to the Clyde and the west coast of Scotland. Now, members of the cross-party group are particularly frustrated that Peel Ports have twice turned down invites to our meeting to explain their proposals. This has further led to the sector feeling like it is going to be imposed upon them without their actual input. Now, fundamentally, the recreational boating sector contributes significantly to Scotland's coastal communities. And other MSPs will recognise this. with their own constituencies and regions. Therefore, the last thing that this sector needs is for recreational boaters to be targeted with an unjustified and extortionate fee. It's also unclear as to how such fees would be collected. Now, who would pick up the admin burden and who is responsible for actually enforcing such a charge? These are things, and many more, these are things that Peel Ports have just not answered in any dialogue that they've had with individuals and representatives from the various boating clubs and marinas. The more the proposals are scrutinised, the more questions there actually are, which has led the sector and the public to conclude that it's quite simply a cash grab. In concluding, Presiding Officer, I want to emphasise that this is not about recreational boaters being unwilling to pay for their pastime. Sailors have always expected to pay for harbour, berthing and mooring fees. They are happy and they want to pay for what they should be paying for. And every MSP here recognises that this is not the action of the Scottish Government. This is the action of a private company. Now, my ask, though, of the Scottish Government, however, is to, first of all, continue the dialogue with Peel Ports to ensure that this cash grab does not come to fruition, and secondly, to look at the Harbour Authority powers, either via revision orders or replacing the 1964 Harbour Authority Act. This Act was designed for a different time, unlike now. The Clyde does belong to the people, and it should be managed for the people, not a private enterprise. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms McMillan. We'll now move to the open debate. I would remind those members who wish to speak in the debate to please ensure that they have pressed the request to speak buttons. And I call Kenneth Gibson to be followed by Brian Whittle. Up to 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I congratulate my colleague Stuart McMillan for bringing this important matter to the Chamber today and for his work over nearly 2 decades in supporting the recreational boating industry. The Clyde is important to the history and identity of the west of Scotland, and many Glaswegians fondly remember travelling down the water on Clyde steamers to visit or holiday in one of the many picturesque seaside towns such as Largs, Millport and Saltcoats in my constituency. Since the mid-1800s, yachting has been very popular in the Firth when it became famous worldwide for its significant contribution to yacht building, with notable designers such as William Fife of Fairlie. When it was first reported that Peel Ports planned to introduce a conservancy fee, or rather Clyde estuary tax, for leisure craft sailing in the Firth, I was contacted by dozens of constituents who expressed their outrage at this proposal. They included sailing club members, hobby boaters and marina representatives. All rightly view the potential annual fee of £100 plus VAT as an unjustified and harmful imposition that will negatively impact leisure activities, tourism and the health and well-being of many often elderly boaters. One constituent said, and I quote, "This fee could in time become the deciding factor in whether to keep a boat on the Clyde or not, with the knock-on economic impact on the tourism and marine industries." Indeed, several small sailing clubs depend heavily on membership subscriptions to survive and could well struggle or close if members decide not to keep their boats in the water. Boaters say they haven't seen any valid reasons whatsoever for the fee and feel that Peel Ports is exploiting leisure boat owners as an easy source of income. Next Tuesday was to be the date for introduction of the Clyde estuary tax. However, Peel Ports did not publish any reasoning for its introduction. Why now? And what services will be delivered to boaters from the resources obtained? The justification, ostensibly, is to support the ongoing management and upkeep of the port area under the provisions of the Clyde Port Authority Confirmation Order Act 1965 and the Harbours Act 1964, both as amended. The principle of a statutory harbour authority to charge leisure vessels a reasonable fee for harbour dues when mooring is accepted normal practice within the more limited area of an actual harbour. However, in this case, imposing the fee on the 1,150 square kilometres of the entire Clyde estuary would obviously go way beyond that and stretch from Glasgow's Albert Bridge all the way to the Isle of Arran. Boaters feel that Peel Ports has a monopoly situation over the entire cruising area, but provides a minimal benefit in return. For instance, Clyde Port claim the fee will contribute to covering the cost of dealing with accidents, despite this being the job of the Marine Accident Investigation Branch. At the Cross-Party Group on Recreational Boating and Marine Tourism's November meeting, which I attended alongside convener Stuart McMillan and Claire Adamson, members of the leisure boating community and sector representatives convincingly expressed their concerns about Peel Port's proposal and their failure to engage with the CPG about their plans. One showed us a communication from Peel Port suggesting that boats whose owners didn't cough up would be boarded. Piracy, no less. It's my strong belief that the Clyde waters belong to the people of Scotland, as Stuart McMillan has already indicated. not corporate interests looking to squeeze money from those who enjoy and rely on them. In January, it was reported that the billionaire Whittaker family behind Peel Ports recently saw earnings increase despite a fall in profits at the group, with the family enjoying a dividend of £153.9 million, up from the previous year's more modest £138.9 million. They don't need the Clyde Estuary tax. Presiding Officer, this proposed levy at any time, let alone one of record shareholder earnings, is an unfair and ill-conceived imposition on the boating community's activities and must be abandoned immediately. Failing that, I trust Scottish ministers will today commit to work with the sector and UK Government, if required, to identify legislative steps that can be taken to challenge this unwanted Clyde Estuary tax. And I thank my colleague Stuart McMillan again for bringing this debate to the Chamber.
Thank you, Mr Gibson. I call Brian Whittle to be followed by Paul Sweeney. Up to 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I am delighted to have the opportunity to speak today. I know that my colleague Jamie Green had hoped to participate as the area covered by Peel Ports falls within his West of Scotland region rather than mine. But I do know many owners of the leisure craft in south of Scotland who will be affected by these proposals, and Mr Green and I are aligned in our views. Deputy Presiding Officer, I am very grateful to Stuart McMillan for bringing this motion forward and for his efforts through the CPG on recreational boating and marine tourism to highlight this unfair, ill-thought-through and ignorant proposal from Peel Ports, which, as members might have gathered, I am utterly opposed to. While I do recognise that Peel Ports have the right to impose reasonable fees and charges to cover their costs relating to services and upkeep within the Clyde Port area, these proposals are far from reasonable. More than that, they have the potential to cause significant harm to the area, damaging marine tourism, deterring investment and, in my view, potentially impacting public health by creating barriers to access. The lack of public engagement and consultation by Peel Ports is hugely disappointing and only serves to reinforce the view they are acting in a high-handed way with no consideration for the wider impacts this decision will have. Turning to my point around the public health impact of this proposal, many of the smaller craft who will be impacted by these proposals are not super yachts or gin palaces. They are small sailing craft crewed by members of the public who enjoy a day out on the water as a way to be active or to relax. Many of them are coastal rowing skiffs built by members of the community and rowed for fun and competition. I am particularly aggravated at the idea that community groups like coastal rowing clubs could be affected by this plan. Deputy Presiding Officer, these are exactly the kind of community groups that I want to see more of. These clubs offer a welcoming environment for people of all ages and abilities to learn new skills, make new friends and keep fit. Sadly for them, their main rowing skiffs are longer than 6 metres, so they will now have to stump up to Peel Ports if they want to row anywhere north of Irvine regularly. And if they are from one of the dozens of other clubs in Scotland who might visit the area to compete in a regatta, they will be hooked for a visitor's fee. Deputy Presiding Officer, I understand the position Peel Ports are in. Their costs are rising and they argue they have issues dealing with abandoned vessels and wrecks. But all those vessels belong to someone, and those individuals should be pursued for costs. Responsible owners and seafarers should not be punished for the negligence of a few. Scotland is an island nation. Its seafaring, whether for leisure or commerce, is an important part of our history and our culture. Leisure boaters take to the sea for many reasons. Some of the challenges of pitting themselves against the elements or against fellow sailors in competition. Some for the camaraderie of meeting others with a shared passion, and many simply for fun. Whatever the reason, though, we should be looking to encourage more people to enjoy the pleasures that boating has to offer, not putting up barriers. Deputy Presiding Officer, I know that Peel Ports don't have to listen to the outcry from organisations like the RYA or any number of local boating organisations who have objected to these plans. But if they do not listen, if they do not change course, then I feel they will be doing profound harm to the communities up and down the Firth of Clyde. And I once again thank my colleague Stuart McMillan for bringing this to the Chamber. Deputy Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Mr Whittle. I now call Paul Sweeney to be followed by Claire Adamson. Up to 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer, and I wish to extend my congratulations to the member for Inverclyde for securing this debate for members' business. And it's a very important issue that I'm sure the Minister will agree brings into sharp focus a public policy failure that has loomed large in the west of Scotland for the last 35 years. The 1991 Ports Act was a disaster for the west of Scotland's economy. and the surreptitious privatisation of what was a public body has presented long-term strategic, economic and social challenges for the development of the west of Scotland. I actually had the opportunity to venture into the Clyde Port building just a few weeks ago, actually to discuss some matters with the property side of Peel about development on the Clyde side. And I had the chance to pop my head into what was once the trustees' chamber of the Clyde Navigation Trust building. This was a public body established under statute to democratically manage a public asset. The Clyde Navigation, a man-made channel from Glasgow city centre down to the Firth of Clyde to undertake port improvements, to build shipbuilding facilities, to enable trade and to enable public access. The reality is it's been privatised in something out of Yeltsin's Russia. You know, it really was an appalling act of surreptitious privatisation of public assets. And the continuing lack of regulation that prevails over the port authorities in Scotland, particularly the private port authorities, is simply unsustainable. And this is an example, another symptom of a wider disease of public policy failure in Scotland. The issue that we have to contend with is not simply about the conservancy fee, though that is an example of the monopolistic behaviour we have become all too familiar with in relation to the Clyde. It's simply a symptom of a wider lack of regulation and a lack of balance of control. I would maybe offer an example to the Minister of bus privatisation in the 1980s and how the government has taken steps to address the imbalance of privatising buses, for example, by introducing greater regulatory scope. Perhaps there could be a similar consideration of how we can deal with port management in Scotland by introducing a similar process of greater public oversight and regulation and accountability for harbour authorities and port authorities in Scotland. It doesn't necessarily need to be maybe the more extreme example of nationalising assets. It's about how do we bring them under a greater degree of public control. And I think that's what we're all seeking to achieve here, whether it's the development and maximising the opportunity of port infrastructure or whether it's the democratic access to the river. It's important that we get this right. I'd extend the point that Mr Gibson made about the sheer scale of the Clyde Port area. 450 square miles of the west of Scotland. It's the biggest harbour authority in the UK by a considerable distance. And this isn't just a contained port facility, it's a vast area of territory, extending from Glasgow Green, essentially at the tidal weir, right the way down to the Isle of Arran. And the reality is, for the Upper Clyde, certainly, as the Minister will be familiar, there isn't much vibrancy, there isn't much leisure traffic on the upper part of the river beyond the Erskine Bridge, there isn't very much at all. So I would say that actually one of the challenges longer term is how do we develop that vibrancy in the river if we're simply going to impose another charge without any commensurate development plan. Where is the marina for Glasgow, for example? When you go to Liverpool, Deputy Presiding Officer, you see the Albert Dock, you see myriad leisure craft, you see a real vibrant riverfront there. If you go to Glasgow, the SECC, Pacific Quay, it's a desert apart from the Waverley, plying its lonely trade up and down the Clyde in the summer season. There isn't very much else going on. So I think there's a broader concern there that, there's port facilities that are underutilised, there is economic development on the riverbanks that has not been achieved because of the monopolistic behaviour. We're seeing a private tax being levied by the Port Authority on pleasure craft for no obvious benefit. And we're now actually seeing no clear plan for the development of infrastructure on the Upper Clyde as well. So if I were to take a small craft to the Riverside Museum, I'd be paying £120 to have an annual conservancy fee, yet there's barely any berthage, there's very little amenity. We really need to get a grip of this, Deputy Presiding Officer. It's simply a bigger problem, and as the member for Inverclyde hinted, the 1964 Harbours Act is ripe for revision and perhaps consideration of how we can extend greater public oversight and accountability, perhaps through the Clyde Mission or the City Region in addressing this, and go back to the idea of having a Clyde Navigation Trust that is accountable to all the public authorities along the river.
Thank you, Mr Sweeney. I now call Claire Adamson to be followed by Katie Clark. Up to 4 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. I grew up virtually on the banks of the Clyde, just beside Strathclyde Park, and the Song of the Clyde was one of the first songs I remember being told when I was a youngster. It was integral to our leisure, it was integral to the community in North Lanarkshire, and it borders most of my constituency along the south side in Motherwell and Wishaw. And there's a lot has been said about what the Clyde has meant to people, belonging to the people, but I think it's worth just remembering some of the things I have seen that might be lost if this goes ahead. I think of Mr Savage, who founded the Clyde Humane Society and volunteered for years, saving people in distress in the Clyde, being there to rescue people who were in trouble, unfortunately bringing many bodies back when there had been a tragedy in the Clyde, and all that work that they have done, still as the Glasgow Humane Society, might not have existed. I've also seen work done with interventions, with people building coracles to go on the Clyde, drugs and alcohol interventions, and really working with young people to let them understand that the rivers are a great source of leisure, a great source of sporting activity, and for the use of everyone there. So to see this curtailed in this way is, to me, absolutely at odds with Scotland's tradition of the right to roam. And I know it's waterways, but imagine if we were to suddenly impose a charge on people accessing Glencoe or hillsides, areas of walking across Scotland, and we know there would be absolute outrage. So I absolutely understand why so many people are against this imposition. As a member of both the Leisure Tourism cross-party group, as a result of my involvement with the cross-party group in accident prevention and safety awareness and the amount of water safety we do in that, I understand the complexities of Scotland's waters. We have one of the longest coastlines in Europe, and the nature of that means that this area vastly encroaches into our inner waterways, including Loch Fyne and all these places that are traditionally known to us as areas of leisure boating and where people can access the water. It covers a whole section of the coastline of the Isle of Arran, and yet people would now not be able to sail round there or around the Isle of Bute or Millport without incurring these fees. And they have been introduced. This legislation has been in existence since 2003, and only now they are coming forward with this imposed fee on leisure and tourism in Scotland. We have a proud history of protecting the rights of people to roam in Scotland, and that should extend to our waterways. And I understand that ports need to be maintained, but that comes with a responsibility to provide services too. And I just feel that the area that this involved is so unique, so vast, that the impact it will have will be detrimental to the whole of the area. And it's something that, as someone who has holidayed many times on Rothesay, we had a family joy of spotting the Waverley whenever we could when we were on holiday. And to think that that environment could change as a result of people deciding not to come to the west of Scotland would be absolutely appalling for Scotland. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Ms Adamson. I now call Katie Clark to be followed by Marie McNair. Up to 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I congratulate Stuart McMillan for securing this debate and every member who has spoken today. I agree that the proposed fees are far from reasonable, and I hope a strong and unified message goes from this chamber today that these proposals are unacceptable. A number of speakers have said that the Clyde belongs to the people of Scotland, and I agree, but we have to accept that the model we have operating fails to deliver on that statement. We know that the Clyde Port Authority was formed as a public trust by an Act of Parliament in 1966, but that was privatised in 1992 when it became Clyde Port. Clyde Port was floated on the Stock Exchange in 1994, subsequently becoming part of Peel Holdings. Despite the fact that its assets are strategic national assets, the shareholders of Peel Ports are a number of investment groups. and consistently decisions are taken which are not in the public interest. So I agree with the speakers who have said that we need to look at the model again, whether that's the ownership or indeed perhaps as a first step looking at regulation. It's highly unusual internationally for a private company to be a port authority, and this is only the case in the UK because of the privatisation that we experienced, an ideological privatisation in the 1990s. As a number of speakers have said, Peel Ports is proposing a fee on all leisure vessels between 6 metres and 24 metres long using the waters within the Clyde Port Authority area, and that's to be introduced very soon on the 1st of April 2025. And I hope that there is a way to ensure that that doesn't happen, because the Clyde Port area is unique in the UK in scale, with estimates of up to 50% of Scotland's leisure craft operating there. Many of those in our boating communities have been lobbying us and have been very clear that they believe that the unconstrained and weakly justified nature of the fee makes it appear like a tax on recreational boating, posing economic detriment to the marine tourism industry, which many coastal businesses depend on, but also many of our constituents enjoy. So far, Peel Port's justifications for these fees do not seem to stand up to scrutiny, and it appears increasingly difficult to see how this fee may benefit the community or visitors. The briefings that were given to members before today indicate that Peel Ports did not investigate and does not respond to accidents in the Clyde, except by the request of the owner or operator. The aids to navigation maintained by Peel Ports have been installed for the benefit of large vessels carrying cargoes rather than for the leisure or passenger vessels that would be captured by this fee, and there's no evidence of Peel Ports conducting regular surveys or environmental practitioner. I'll take an intervention.
Paul Sweeney.
Thank my friend for giving way. She's making a very powerful set of points about the lack of accountability. Does she agree also one of the key challenges on the Upper Clyde is the lack of regular dredging of the river, which has been the case for many years, and it's severely constraining navigation on the upper part of the river and thus effectively sterilising much of it to navigation?
Katie Clark.
I think lack of maintenance has been an issue in many parts, and indeed some of us are very aware of the situation at Ardrossan Harbour with the failure to maintain the port as having devastating economic consequences. The proposed conservancy fee represents just one of a number of decisions that are being taken by this multinational that I would put to the Scottish Government are not in the public interest. I'm pleased to support this motion, and on this particular issue I call on the Scottish Government to take direct and immediate action to intervene and to urge Peel Ports to scrap their plans for implementation of this fee.
Thank you, Ms Clark. And I call Marie McNair. Up to 4 minutes, please, Ms McNair.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I congratulate Stuart McMillan MSP for securing this debate? I know he's done a lot of work in this regard to get Peel Ports to abandon the proposal. This decision, if taken forward, will negatively affect boaters along the River Clyde, which includes those within Clydebank, part of my constituency. These plans to introduce a conservation fee, can't even say it, sorry, for leisure craft in the Clyde Port area has caused real concern for my constituents and amongst British Marine and British Marine Scotland, who have been working to represent members' interests in opposing this plan. Responses from a recent British Marine Scotland member survey suggest there is overwhelming opposition to this proposal, and as Stuart McMillan has rightly put it, it isn't just about boaters in Scotland, it's about people who sail from other parts of the UK or even Europe to enjoy the Clyde. And there are massive concerns that this fee will put them off doing so. Presiding Officer, while it's not possible for the Scottish Government to dictate business decisions made by a harbour authority on how to manage the harbour, I am grateful to the Cabinet Secretary for Transport for taking into consideration the concerns from vessel owners across Scotland and writing to Peel Ports regarding this issue. Presiding Officer, this decision, if introduced, could damage Scotland's marine tourism industry and the economies of coastal communities that rely on the sector. Stuart McMillan's petition has captured the sense of feeling about this issue, and it's attracted over 4,630 signatures so far. It's also concerning that despite Peel being invited along twice to outline their plans to the cross-party group on recreational boating and marine tourism, they declined to participate. And as such, the CPG unanimously agreed on the 27th of November 2024 that members' position is that these plans should be abandoned. Unfortunately, by failing to attend and be held accountable, this adds to the frustration that the boating community is feeling, and the feeling that this decision has been put upon them without their input. I do understand, however, from correspondence with the Cabinet Secretary that Peel Ports have assured her that a wider consultation process with all relevant stakeholders is proposed to take place in the coming months, with an outcome on the consultation expected later this year. And I hope as many as possible are able to take part in that, and I'll certainly I'll put that on my socials and encourage as many constituents in my area to sign that. Unfortunately, there is no doubt that this decision will put boaters off sailing within Clyde Ports water, and Stuart McMillan has expressed another worthwhile concern, that is a conservation fee. I can't say it, but it's not happening tonight. It's introduced that will result in a progressive increase in charges. This decision, in my opinion, places another financial burden on people at a time when they still face higher costs, and as British Marine made it clear, it will restrict freedoms to sail in Scottish waters, harm marine tourism and impact small coastal communities. And along with the fact this could deter boaters and harm small coastal communities, the rationale behind the fee remains questionable, and there seems to be an absence of clear provisions of the services or facilities in return. It also unfairly targets small leisure craft, as already mentioned, rather than the larger vessels. It is not, Presiding Officer, that boaters are unwilling to pay for the pastime. As the Chief Executive of RYA Scotland stated, sailors have always expected to pay for harbour berthing and mooring fees, and this is about the imposition of a fee with no clear provision of services or facility across a huge part of recreational boating community. The recreational boating sector contributes significantly to our coastal communities, and we just can't burden them with unjustifiable fees, and it's quite clear that this is a wrong decision. Therefore, Presiding Officer, I join my colleagues here today in calling for this decision to be abandoned immediately. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms McNair. I now call on Cabinet Secretary Fiona Hislop to respond to the debate. Up to 7 minutes, please.
I would like to thank Stuart McMillan for his work at highlighting a number of issues of importance to the maritime sector, both here in Parliament tonight and through his role as convener of the cross-party group for recreational boating and marine tourism. I found members' contributions on this issue today to be thought-provoking and considered, and I will reflect on the contributions made. MSPs have highlighted the strength of feelings on a subject that is important to Scotland as a seafaring nation. Scotland's waters are vast and unique, and the use of our seas for the movement of people and goods, fishing, recreation and facilitating the increasing offshore energy demand shows that this issue is only going to remain of huge importance in the years to come. There will be challenges on competing and changing demands, ensuring our waters remain safe for those at sea and that our waters are maintained and protected for future generations is crucial. The port sector includes a combination of ownership models, but the overarching principles of how a port can operate remains the same, regardless of whether a port authority is privately owned, trust or local authority operated. Scottish ministers have no legal powers to instruct the decisions a port makes. This is legally enshrined through both the Harbours Act 1964 and the local harbour order legislation each port operates under, as Stuart McMillan and others have acknowledged. Now, harbour authorities are independent, self-governing bodies that are responsible for the safety and efficiency of marine operations within their jurisdiction. And their duties include managing ports and harbours for safe navigation, protecting the environment and ensuring overall operational efficiency. Therefore, the Scottish Government has no say in the day-to-day running of their business, nor can it dictate business decisions made on how to best utilise its resources. In a second, ports are held to account by their own legislation rather than by the Scottish or the UK Government.
Brian Whittle.
I'm very grateful for the Cabinet Secretary for giving way, and I do appreciate what she says, and that these are private companies of which the Scottish Government cannot intervene. But do the Scottish Government not give grants to some of the ports to help with their development and for docking of ships, etc.? Is there no leverage there potentially that the Scottish Government can use?
Cabinet Secretary.
The role is limited and is in the marine sector, and it tends to be for marine operations from that area of government. But in the instance that I'm referring to, due to the importance of this issue that we're discussing tonight to a wide range of small vessel owners, I did write to Peel Ports to highlight the strength of feeling of stakeholders. Peel Ports confirmed that they are in the preliminary data collection phase of a community consultation process to assess the possible introduction of an annual conservancy fee for leisure vessels on the Clyde. Now, we've been advised that no decision has been made on how to proceed at this point in time. Peel Ports also noted that any formal decision to implement a licence fee would be preceded by a thorough public consultation, ensuring that the perspective of all marine users are taken into account. And if introduced, Peel Ports also confirmed that their view is that any proposed conservancy fee would be in compliance with their legal responsibilities as set out within their own local legislation and the Harbours Act 1964. Now, there is a potential role for Scottish ministers in the future if a fee or charge was in place and a user invoked Section 31 of the Harbours Act 1964. Section 31 provides a right of objection to Scottish ministers against the imposition of ship, passenger and goods dues. The Scottish Government will process any objections lodged under Section 31 Harbours Act 1964, and any person considering making a formal challenge should take independent legal advice. So if the Section 31 procedures are invoked, then ministers' role will be in effect involve adjudication of a dispute. It would therefore not be appropriate for me as Minister at this time to discuss the potential substance of any dispute or to offer any view of it, the parameters of the right of objection under the Act, or how ministers may carry out their decision-making function. These are matters for objectors to consider and take a view on without any input from ministers as potential decision makers. So there is no scope for the issue to be dealt with other than by way of a transparent, impartial and even-handed consideration of an objection duly made. So, however, at this stage, there is no fee or charge in place, and I understand Peel Ports are exploring all options. We understand that a wider consultation process with all relevant stakeholders is proposed to take place in the coming months, with an outcome on the consultation expected later this year. The importance of charges to the viability of ports and harbours and the safe management of our waters and the principle of users contributing to these costs is well recognised. However, it is also right that the levying of such dues should be proportionate. While statutory harbour authorities are independent bodies governed by their own legislation, proper consultation with users and interested stakeholders on proposals is important. So, I'm about to conclude, but yes.
Paul Sweeney.
Thank the Minister for giving me, and I appreciate her points regarding the provisions of the 64 Act. I just wanted to ask if she could perhaps allude to a need for greater regulatory oversight of ports, particularly in things like dredging and maintaining the navigation channel, which surely is integral, and there should be a legal obligation that harbour authorities are held to account for such fundamental things.
Cabinet Secretary.
So in closing, I would encourage anyone with views on the issue to engage fully with any forthcoming consultation on this specific issue that's been debated tonight. But I also thank members for raising wider, more general issues which surround it. And I think this issue has brought to fore some of the historic nature of what currently is in place in terms of regulation of this area, and it is something I did say that I would take away and reflect on. I think important points have been made, and I think there's something about standards and expectations that have been quite rightly raised in a variety of different contributions, and I will also reflect on that as well. So I hope in setting out my legal responsibilities, I've given an indication of why I can't give an opinion on what's been said today, but I certainly have listened very carefully to the well-considered and well-crafted points that have been made by members tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. That concludes the debate, and I close this meeting.